Man, if you live in a cold climate, thank goodness for cameras. We can page back, look at some different photos. This is what we're dealing with in our area right now. A little bit of snow first part of February, but we're looking forward to looking at something like this. But as we wait for spring to come, I put together a collection of photos I've taken over the years where we've got some different interesting branch habit, different bark, some different bark we're going to look at that I think makes some of the trees look very interesting. Even our dead plants. I don't know why I'm drawn to sometimes dead trees that have just perfect scaffolding. You could create something underneath there. Check that out. Somebody's using that as an art piece in a sense. It's another dead branch that clematis finds. So that's kind of what we're going to look at today. Some of those different type things. It all starts with this little seedling. And we're going to focus in first on the cottonwood. This is one of the largest trees in the area that I live. I'm next to the Missouri River up in the northern Great Plains. And about 15 years ago, this whole lower area was completely flooded. Last summer I was out in this area along the river just kind of exploring, look at some of the different cottonwoods, the willows. And back in the distance we've got a stand of some willow trees. When the river floods or the water level raises, it carries those light frothy seeds onto the shore. When it settles back down, boom, there you have it. You've got a fresh stand of willow. Same thing happens with a lot of the cottonwood trees that grow native around here. Where we've got cottonwoods probably over 100 years old in our area. And there are some of the different cottonwoods you can see. Some of those larger trees mixed in with some different prunus, different ash. Just a beautiful little area to hike. Another picture of, man, I used to love climbing trees when I was younger. I don't know about you, got myself in some predicaments, but I guess I'm still here to talk about it, so that's a good sign. But you can never completely get it out of a person. I see this big, massive trunk laying here in my little hike, and I thought, I got to at least climb up on that. I can still, I think, handle that. But look at the bark on that. Some of that orange are different lichens, just a massive trunk here. And I'm not going to get philosophical, but there's some kind of energy around trees of this size, even when they're down or when they're dead. There's a close-up of that cottonwood bark right there. Just huge, deep ridge and furrow. I didn't measure that, but I'm betting it's about, in that 2 to 3 inch range. Okay, here you go. If you get out into nature, you can use that to help you create in your own landscape. I'm picturing here maybe just a little bit of that underbrush taken out of there, and you could actually incorporate something like this into a garden. So if you're fortunate enough to live in a wooded area, man, I would definitely consider doing some of those things. And if you've never seen what beavers can do, look at this. Yeah, they chisel away on a plant, and that's a mature tree that they've dropped. And what they do, they'll get them to fall into the river there. Damage to us, is survival to them. I thought this was pretty interesting. That's actually a tree upside down. If they were to clean that up a little bit, just a great little, almost a gazebo just made out of a tree. And I think most of us have seen stumps that have either been converted into stools or small little tables. So there's just a lot of different things you can do with trees even after they're gone. Our first tree with some unique bark is the blue beech. Look at that. It's also called musclewood, and for good reason. Just look at that. It looks like that mussel, and that's what I love about the blue beech. As I started reading about this, I didn't think I could grow it in my area, but apparently it is tolerant to some of the higher pH problems, and that's what we have, a neutral to high pH. Its native area is kind of an understory plant. Minnesota to the east will tolerate shade very well. I'm going to give this a try, see if I can find this in nursery, see if I can get it growing out in the open, in the prairie type state. I think it's going to survive. I believe it's hardy to zone 3. There's not much to look at other than the trunks. It's also called American hornbeam is another name for it. That's the fruit. There's a close-up of the leaf. So nothing too showy in the canopy itself, mostly just grown, I think, for that bark, that musclewood. Juniper. Yeah, let's get into the Juniperus genus. The eastern red cedar, Rocky Mountain juniper are two common names. And that's a fresh cut somebody did. And look at that striking red there. That just stuck out like a sore thumb. I thought it was awesome. The juniper, they've got a little bit of a stringy bark. I find it very unique. There's a close-up of one. Look at that gnarly, the knots in there. Just a lot of character. You can almost tell a story from that. I thought this was really a cool idea. This is most likely was just a massive evergreen shrub, some type of juniper. And whoever lives there, they pruned up those lower branches. The rock bed may or may not have been there, but they just highlighted it and they just created something really unique out of that juniper. So well done. Here's another juniper, probably earlier in his life, had dieback, just a multi-trunk, but the caretakers here, they went ahead and they just let it do its natural thing, and I think it's kind of unique there as well. Here we're back to that piece I found on a garden tour, and they have this intermixed within their daylilies, their coneflower, and they're using it as a trellis. And this just was just something that I still want to find some kind of massive tree, get it moved into my yard and use it for that effect. I'm just fascinated by it. That's just one of the favorite things I've come across. Here out in Colorado, it's the Garden of the Gods. And I think this is a pine. I wasn't paying much attention to whether or not I knew what the species was. I was just more fascinated by how the roots have been exposed, obviously in a very high erosion area due to a public garden type setting. Maybe the soil is also quite prone to erosion. But look at that, just fascinating. Again, I'm drawn to that I don't know, that architecture, that art form of the dead tree. So much we can enjoy in that. Now we're moving on to white oak. Now I can't grow this in my area. This is pretty much again from Minnesota east. I'm west of there, but look at how long and wide that is. This area, they've allowed those oak branches just to do their natural thing. They're not pruning them up, and they've actually, if you take a look close here, they've intermingled with the ground surface area, and I would imagine they've actually kind of layered. That's a propagation term where the branch can start rooting in. So just a really unique, fascinating area how they've let that tree do that. So you don't always have to prune up the branches. If you've got the space, it's fun to experiment. There's the oak seed of the white oak, and that's one of the best ways to identify oak trees is by their seed. They've got the moss cup, and then that projection. They've all got a little bit different style or different look to them. Kentucky coffee tree. Look at this little guy with the white tree guard on it. Yeah, that's a Kentucky coffee tree. I'm not going to be around to see what it looks like when it becomes something like that. Isn't that fascinating? Really, really characteristic, unique bark in that Kentucky coffee tree. Just love it. There's a picture of another Kentucky coffee tree from an elevated point of view looking down, and just that architecture and scaffolding is just amazing. They've got a compound leaf, little bean pods. I think a lot of people would probably consider them, you know, messy. I never really like to call a tree messy. I try to enjoy every aspect of them. There's the fall color of a Kentucky coffee tree right there. Let's move on to a little bit smaller tree, the Japanese tree lilac. This is great for lifting up that ornamental trunkage. I did a video recently where we touched on the Japanese tree lilac. I'll put a bookmark in the description for you if you want to take a look at that. But here's an area, pruning job I got into where the lower branches, it was just becoming, you know, a small shrub, small tree. And there we go, we lifted up the branches. So now you can imagine many, many years later, if you keep doing that, the branching gets bigger, you can let it cascade out, you know, and eventually you can get up to an area like this, along this sidewalk. These are some pretty old Japanese tree lilacs, but look at that effect. Very, very nicely done there. And the flowering crabs, you know, that's well done there too in that pathway, creating that tunnel. It's a nice medium-sized tree. You can get a lot of interesting branch habit with a lot of the flowering crab apples as well. Red bud. Okay, this is one of those, maybe it was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but look at that. You know, how do you imagine that happened? I'm just always very thankful to the different caretakers and gardeners in different areas that allow plants to develop out into something like this and become such a conversation piece. I tried to go red bud one time and it died out the first winter. There is a Minnesota strain of seed that's supposedly hardy to zone 4. I'm considered zone 4, but I just didn't have any luck. But they've got a beautiful pink flower in the spring. Great tree to grow. I wish this photo was a little bit better, but that red bud in this area had some really cool branching habit. Very similar to this. That's actually a maple branch, but that was kind of the effect a lot of the red buds were doing as well. Just didn't get a great photo. Here's another in the wrong place at the wrong time. We'll be brief on this one. This is Canada red cherry, also called Schubert chokecherry. Now this is on a city boulevard, and I'd be really surprised that they left it. Normally, you know, you get into cities, they want that tree perfect, straight, they'll take it out if not. But this either got maybe pushed over by snow, maybe a vehicle hit it, and they just let it kind of be its own thing. So Canada red cherry, I thought that was nice. There's the Canada red cherry that's just in its natural state. I don't recommend it. It suckers, you know, just heavy. It comes up everywhere within a lawn, and also it's susceptible to black knot, which is a fungus. So it's a nice red leaf, fast growing, good for wildlife, but it's definitely got its drawbacks. All right, Amure cork tree. This is another one In my area, you don't hear much about it, see it very often, but the unique part about the Amure cork tree is the bark. If you walk up to that and you push on that, it's spongy, hence the name cork, Amure cork tree. So unique there. Kind of has a similar leaf, compound leaf like the Kentucky coffee tree, but that's the main attribute for that tree. Okay, pines. We're going to move on to, I don't know if this is Scotch pine. I think it is. This is a little Japanese garden area, so most likely they're going to keep this pruned, you know, tight little balls, manipulated, similar to something like you see there. But the other end of the spectrum, look at this. This is a Scotch pine here. Look at the branching on this. That's just a kid's dream to climb on something like that with those lower sturdy branches. Yeah, and here's a horizontal photo that we're panning across again on that Scotch pine. Just look at that. This was an area that was enjoyable to come across. I really like that. There again, kudos to the caretakers, just letting those lower branches be. We don't always have to prune everything up so far. It really makes a difference in a botanical gardens. Another recent video I mentioned, Uncle Fogey pine. This is a Banksiana species. It's a jack pine. And again, you're just going to get some wild characteristic branching on the Uncle Fogey. So mine's pretty small. You know, I'm waiting for that to eventually do something like this. I hope I get to see it in some of its glory. Moving on to birch, I don't have a lot of mature birch photos, but this was actually, I believe it was Royal Frost. It's a purple leaf birch, and it died back one winter to the ground, and I thought it was dead, so I cut it off. Well, lo and behold, you know, about 12 to 14 trunks came roaring back, so I guess I just went ahead and I started pruning off all the lower branching. I'm looking for that eventual trunk effect on it. This is how it kind of turned out a couple years ago, where we'll just keep lifting up those lower branches. Amure maple. This is another great one. Did a video on this as well, where we actually pruned this up. I'll bookmark that in description as well. And we just lifted up these branches, and then we're after the same thing here, where you've got this really unique ornamental trunks. The Amure maple, Tatarian maple, medium-sized trees. That's great for getting that ornamental trunkage. There's another picture. Well done, you know. This person here, they went ahead, they've got one here on each side of the driveway. Just a unique character on that branching. I feel like we just got going, but that's all I've got for you on this video. I just wanted to encourage you, if you're in an area, you can get out and walk, ride your bike, get ideas from nature, incorporate that into your landscape, maybe on a smaller scale, even foraging for different berries. I appreciate you stopping by Garden Hike. We'll see you again next video. These are so good.